Let me tell you a secret. I have superpowers. But now, in a comic book universe, it'd be called something cool like omnipresence, since I'm always told that I'm everywhere. But in real life, it's a lot more anticlimactic, as you'll soon see. Now, this nifty little quality didn't come from being bitten by a radioactive spider. I wasn't initiated into a secret society, unless you count the local Dungeons and Dragons group, and I wasn't born on Krypton, although it does come with its fair share of kryptonites. Curiously, it comes from a very unlikely source: mental illness. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or simply ADHD, is marked by an ongoing pattern of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and inattention that interferes with functioning or development. I was, unfortunately, blessed with it at birth. What this basically means is that my brain has developed in a way that's different from neurotypicals. Certain structures are smaller than usual. My body has difficulty in producing and transmitting key neurochemicals like dopamine, and there are abnormal activities in specific areas. It's speculated that ADHD was a survival mechanism for our ancestors, as stated by David Barak in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B. Its symptoms were actually boosts that increase the efficiency and skill, and of course, life expectancy of hunter gatherers. The hyperfixation on the hunt, unprecedented olfactory and gustatory sensitivities, and the constant awareness of the periphery are just a few traits. But as we move on from prehistoric scenarios, we neurodivergents find ourselves in a world flipped upside down with a revolutionary way of life. What this means is that people with ADHD who can't stand being stationary are now forced to sit through long school lectures and boring work hours. We, who are physically, and I mean this, physically pained by having to do something that our brain isn't letting us, have pointless, rote based, repetitive assignments. Interesting, isn't it? Indeed, modern society and its constructs thereof are built around the needs and leisures of the majority, neurotypicals. I will now be highlighting a few key manifestations and guide you through them bit by bit. I'd love it, really love it, if you could listen keenly and watch out for telltale signs that anyone you know may show. Exhibit A. Random bursts of energy might define someone like me. Our brains work not on the principle of order and a preset discipline, but an incredibly hard to resist impulse to do or not to do a particular thing. I repeat, during these moments, it's not at all a choice of want or will, but an imperative doctrine imposed upon us by our central nervous systems. While on the topic of order, let's peruse its very opposite: chaos, which we neurodivergents seem to have an affinity for. Now, this isn't always bad or unhealthy, but can look like a messy, organizedly chaotic work desk on which everything is exactly where it needs to be, at least for us. Our emotions can be random and intense. This turbulent state of being makes us very passionate indeed about the things we do like and find comfort in. This, in turn, and our exponential reactions and actions to these things can make us hard to handle. Fulfilling conversations with people like me, on the other hand, can last for hours. I tend to correlate and find connections between seemingly unrelated things. Our minds are like a vast spiderweb diagram with links between the most ridiculous units. Another thing we almost always struggle with are societal norms. We often question rules simply for an explanation of them, and very rarely follow orders blindly. I, for one, have trouble with social cues, a problem that I still haven't figured a way out from. For example, a question: Srujan, why are you late for class? The answer: the bus was stuck in traffic. To which the reply: I don't want your excuses. The result being an extremely confused Srujan trying to figure out the difference between an answer and an excuse. I end this particular segment of my talk by addressing one of the most key and most typical traits that neurodivergents exhibit: zoning out. We can be in the middle of a heated discussion, a fire evacuation drill, an important interview, a TED talk, or absolutely anything else in the world, and suddenly go blank, expressionless, completely forgetting what we were doing. It's like our brains are quite literally rebooting in those moments. It's completely involuntary, bewildering, and with the right sense of humor, hilarious. So, do you know what I'm talking about? Believe it or not, the symptoms of ADHD are actually very relatable for people who have it themselves. Now, I am not a psychiatrist yet, but if you experience any of the above in yourself or others, do consider reaching out to one. It's my duty to do my part in reducing the stigmas associated with mental health and, of course, bringing a change to the light of mental health. ADHD does not mean the end of the world, and having it with medications is 1,000 times better than having it without. I say this from personal experience. The symptoms of my ADHD were not diagnosed at an early age because I was high functioning back then as well, and simply because of a lack of knowledge regarding it. I didn't have a name for what I was battling, especially when ADHD began to affect my life most drastically. But to give you the best possible panoramic view of how and when this happened, I'll have to brush you up on the compressed and extremely cut down story of my life. For a long time, I was happy and comfortable. My parents raised me with love and taught me a lot of what I know. And I excelled at basically everything I wanted to. The years were decorated with activities and awards, and near constant engagement in one form or the other. The symptoms of ADHD, especially at a tender age, are often masked and not paid much heed to. Until one day, mine became painfully evident. Suddenly, in sixth grade, as the syllabus and its difficulty slope rose, I could no longer shine with the luster I once showed. I strangely found my grades dropping, my mental health nosediving, and the world around me too loud, too much. I realized then that these were the manifestations of a serious cognitive disorder. In 10th grade, when things inevitably spiraled out of control, was when my parents, who are knowledgeable doctors by the way, realized that something was incredibly amiss. I was quickly diagnosed as having ADHD by 3 different psychiatrists and prescribed with medications. I survived those sullen, dark days because I had the wisdom to opt for store bought chemicals in the place of organic ones. But on the ever golden bright side, I was now armed with not only pharmaceuticals, but most importantly, knowledge, awareness. I knew what I had and I read everything there was to read about it. It was around this time that I took up my favorite instrument in craft, the flute. It was like a field ripe for harvest. My mind, I mean. I was challenged by the magnitude, complexity, and sheer infiniteness of Hindustani classical music. This was when I learned to tap into the neurodivergence and channel it into a hobby, learning the flute at a mind blowing pace and with unbridled curiosity. It was my Guruji, Sri Himanshu Nanda, who brought this revolutionary gift to my arsenal. I realized then that hyperactivity really was something that I could learn to use. In fact, Guruji has researched about music in relation to neurodivergent children, which has only heightened my love and respect for him. While music did set an example of what I could achieve with my abilities and willpower, It didn't do much in the sense of healing or alleviating the symptoms that I struggled with. The effects of music on my ADHD were not always necessarily calming, although I never faced frustration or saturation of it. In that sense, I'm an example of a deviation from the school of thought that suggests music can be a form of therapy for people with cognitive behavioral disorders. For another person with ADHD, on the other hand, it might work like a miracle. That's the thing about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's extremely subjective to the past experiences, environment, and upbringing of an individual. This makes it hard to talk about, since it's capitalized with exceptions practically everywhere. But there is one common theme. It's difficult. It is difficult to grapple with the abominable forces of executive dysfunction and the actual mental disability surrounding it all. It is difficult when you want to do something, really want to do something, are obliged to do it even, but you in that moment simply cannot. When your brain essentially rebels, when you're lying sprawled on the sofa or on the bed, or on the worst of the days, the cold, hard floor, thinking about not doing the thing while not doing it. It is difficult to be dissatisfied and unfulfilled, constantly jumping from one task to the other, never being able to slow down and catch a break by pulling the brakes. It's difficult to live life as if operating a remote controlled body. Think of it this way. The neurotypical mind is like a well-oiled machine with an accelerator and a decelerator. The neurodivergent mind, on the other hand, is like a flaming unicycle with a nitro button that only works half the time. It's difficult to live without a lack of self-regard, being sometimes unable to take care of yourself, clean yourself, feed yourself, be yourself. It is difficult to be surrounded by this glittering, starry blue void, which is slowly closing in on you and the little island that you're trapped on, to be subject to its whims and fancies, and be, in the purest sense of the word, different. I must confess, I'm also trapped on my own little island, surrounded by my own constricting, convulsing, confusing void. But that island is mine. I can shape it the way I want, steer it where I please, grow as many flowers on it as I'd wish. I used to complain about the unfairness of being born like this until wise people made me ask myself one day, what then? I've found my answer. Acceptance, and then the good old-fashioned comeback. I've chosen that in spite of the challenges, I'll mark my life with confidence and courage. Something, again, that I learned, a practice skill, a honed art. I learned to look at the parts of my little differentness that I could monopolize and weaponize. The unceasing hunt for dopamine, for example, makes me try my hand at so many different things and give my all to excel at them. In this way, I've built a wide, gilded sheet of experiences, talents, and achievements that only make me want to grow more and be more. And of course, the hyperfixation. The laser focus on something that substitutes for the needs of my lovely, faulty brain. Something that makes me able to produce masterpieces of marvelous magnitudes, if I do say so myself, and being able to produce a month's worth of work in an hour. The future will be far more colorful and prosperous, ladies and gentlemen, if we accommodate all needs of varying levels and capacities, judiciously design schedules and curate flows to appeal to the intrinsic needs of those who are differently abled. People like me can amount to something, really, something. Look around you and you'll find examples, if you wish not to consider the dozens of neurodivergent celebrities and billionaires that you've probably heard about ad nauseum. I'd say the crux and essence of this entire talk is to empower yourself through the power of acceptance. It is by far the most powerful tool that you can use to change your life, one that spans awareness, aptitude, and avenue. I'll take your leave by saying problems and tribulations are a staple of life from times untold. The path to resolving them is a constant in all terms of analogy, even if everyone is born different. Some people are born entitled, others impoverished. Some are born with talent, others with logic. Some with skill, and others with will. And then there are people like me, who are born with superpowers. Attention deficit, hyperactivity superpowers. Thank you very much. One last gift from me to you, a musical performance to an excellent audience. You've seen me play the flute with my fingers flying fast over the holes, right? But I'll leave you by telling you one last final secret. I can't tie my shoelaces. Thank you.